Here we are. First live stream on the channel. Uh, who knows what we're going to talk about? Who knows if anyone will join? Um, but I just thought I'd come on here because um, I had just finished an assignment for school. I have about an hour before I'm going to hop on a call with a friend. Um, and I've kind of been a little bit immobilized because I just cut two of my, technically three, but really two fingers badly. Um, I was trying to scrub this bowl in the kitchen. There was some residue from some tomatoes last night that wasn't coming off, and I was like scrubbing it really hard with this dish towel, and then it slipped out of my hands and gashed my fingers pretty badly. So I had to do the assignment for class, voice to text. I don't even know why I'm saying any of this. No one's here. But the so I'm in this I have kind of multiple different big topics that I'd kind of want to explore with different classes that I'm in. But I'm in this poetry class, and well, technically two. Um, and the title of the class is called The Poetics of Enchantment. And um, the professor's idea of enchantment is essentially this enlightening and illumination of life. And all of the texts that we're reading um, deal with that kind of movement from a disenchantment to an enchantment in some shape or fashion. And so the course just started this week, and the first text that we had to read was The Allegory of the Cave, which is probably the original, at least in the Western canon, text on enchantment. Although I don't think Plato and Socrates and the Greeks had that term. Maybe they did. I'm not quite sure. Um, and so there's been a lot of really I have a discussion for that today at 3. And we had the lecture on Monday followed by a mini discussion, and there's a Discord in which a lot of people have been sharing ideas about the text, different questions they've had, different connections to other texts, and it's been an amazing conversation. There's been so much really valuable information that's being shared. Um, and one really interesting thread of discussion has been surrounding the fact that the original prisoner, was forced out instead of volitionally deciding to leave the cave and, discovering that the cave and all the objects that all the prisoners thought were objects were mere projections, and that there's, you know, the sun and everything. Um, and I was remembering that OG Rose, Daniel Gardner and Michelle Gardner, his wife, had written a book called Belonging Again. And in that book, they devote an entire section of the book to this very part of the allegory of like, what is the importance of the fact that the prisoner did not voluntarily seek out his own enlightenment, but he was dragged out of the cave. Um, and people shared multiple different interpretations of it. One that I kind of elucidated was that the prisoners were not aware of the moreness of reality, and so they were perfectly content, and actually it brought them like a great deal of satisfaction of trying to identify what these shadows were and these objects. And so, in the absence of actually knowing uh, what was what existed outside of the cave, there presented no motivation for them to leave. Um, and there's, like one person. Let me read it actually. There's one person who mentioned. Ooh, let me get on the right channel. There's one person who mentioned interesting comment that in Plato and in Plato and Socrates' time that um, there was kind of a resistance to the concept of these quote unquote higher realms of reality. And so this person was suggesting that where can I find it now? I don't want to like butcher it. Yeah, and you know, it's interesting because many of us conceptualize, and this was mentioned by multiple people, that many of us conceptualize enlightenment as this volitional act, right? Like, and it's kind of part of the hero's journey of like, realizing that your map of reality is incomplete or limited, and being kind of compelled by this beatific vision, um, whether it be some experience that you had an encounter with some form of divinity sacredness, or watching a model moral exemplar in your life who is is comporting themselves in a way you are attracted to, um and and this compels you to literally change your life. um But, one thing that was talked about in this discussion was the archetype of the reluctant leader, which is also you see that present in all sorts of stories. We were talking about The Hobbit and how Bilbo did not want to go on the journey, and it was Gandalf who like kind of in a sense like dragged him out of Bag End, right? Like he was perfectly content with his comfortable, kind of quaint, removed from the entropy, the chaos of the world. Like, he had no he had no reason to, venture out, right? And had no skills for it as well. There was like a fear of placing himself in these adverse conditions. And yet he finds himself there, and therein lies his transformation, is the encounter with the unknown. Um and so yeah, um there's a lot there in the reluctant leader archetype. And it was actually Plato who said like those who those who don't want to um wield power are the ones most equipped to use it or possess it, things like that. um and there's obviously kind of nuances in that, and like I don't think he would suggest that everyone who is resistant to leading would be a good leader, but the kind of sense being that there is a kind of wisdom in um, being resistant to, because one thing that you know is in the allegory of the cave is Socrates is um, very kind of adamant to emphasize that to leave the cave and to be confronted with the light is painful as well as it's um, mystifying and glorious. It's like it's blinding. It's very literally blind. It's like your eyes have to adjust to, your cones and your rods, literally and metaphorically have to adjust to this new reality. Um, and my friend Daniel Garner makes the point often that in the Paradiso, Dante lusts after Beatrice, and Beatrice is very adamant to remind him that um, her smile will kill him before he's ready to experience it fully. Um, and so there's this kind of idea of like being prepared for beauty. Um, I'm kind of getting off track, but it's the forced out. I've always been since you know, I didn't even, notice that or kind of make note of it the first few times I read Plato's Cave. And then when I listened to or read, Daniel's distinction, I was that was really interesting that that detail is there. Um, yeah, and there's so much in that story. I mean, it's truly like you can't even really wrap your head around like how influential that story of Plato's cave. Um, Also, I see that there's 3 people in the live stream, and I've never done this before, and so I'm trying to figure out. Oh, now there's 0. I'm trying to figure out how to like actually see who it is that's here, um, which I don't know how to do that. But anyways, for whoever is in here, I'm talking about Plato's Cave. Um, I'm in a Poetics of Enchantment class right now, and it just started this week. And the first text that we are reading is Plato's The Allegory of the Cave. And so just kind of musing on that. Yeah, there's also kind of like Plato's form and like what he was kind of getting at with that, and how the allegory of the cave, represents uh, the kind of journey that the prisoner goes through in being forced out of the cave, seeing the light, and then descending back down to illuminate the prisoners. Kind of the whole story uh, can be thought of as a uh, pilgrimage of sorts, a journey towards Plato's form. And someone made the comment in the Discord that for Plato, the form is kind of akin to our conception of God today. That there's this perfection, there's this lack of mystery. It's like um, it's without error. Um, and kind of similar to the Christian idea of God, our our attempts to depict that form, whether it be in art, whether it be in uh, ideas, concepts, whether it be anything that we create, is a mere attempt for us to um, arrive at a deeper understanding and move closer to the form. But those things need not be confused for the form itself. So, for example, a painting of Jesus, baby Jesus in the manger, or Jesus on the cross, um, is not the form itself of what those images represent in the Christian um, religion. They Because they are made by a human, they are still incomplete and still cannot represent the entirety of the form, or else it won't be something that is an ideal that exists outside of us. if it's something that we can, like like a table or a chair. It's like we know how to build something that has four legs that can hold objects. And so, no one would say they worship a chair, um, because it's not something that is beyond and higher and um, yeah, it's something that can be like obtained and held and like objectified. Um, and there's parallels to the journey of leaving the cave and coming back that is synonymous with that, because the light that the prisoner encounters is beyond the um, is is beyond the prisoner's conception of what the world is up until that point. Enclosed, think about what a cave, what it feels like to be in a cave. It's 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 a finite space that is enshrouded in darkness, that um is kind of antithetical to this opening, this progressive, this expansive sense of life. um and then the task of coming back and illuminating the prisoners, it's like it's not like this person is tasked with disseminating quantitative, tangible knowledge of like the world. It's like they're being tasked with facilitating an opening to reality, um, a desire to move from the cave to the light. And one thing we were talking about in our discussion is like how much of a lag time there is in human beings, um, to change their minds about things. Like when there's a certain conception of reality that you have, and you see everything through that frame, and then you're presented with something that like utterly shatters it. um it, People don't just go, oh wow, that's amazing, I'm like struck by awe, like I want to just plunge in that ocean when I've been in this kiddie pool the whole time. It's like, no. We don't know how to swim in that water. um and we need uh competent teachers who have walked that path, and who have struggled, and who have experienced the pain of exposing yourself to the light when you've been in the dark your whole life. And like one thing that I'm curious about is like, because if we think about like the model of like an ideal mentor or guide in life, um one thing that a lot of people are wary of is, being a student of a teacher who hasn't actually endured the things that they are teaching about. And I think that's like a big criticism of like academia these days. It's like you have, say, a psychology professor who doesn't have like their own private practice, hasn't worked with people in acute trauma, um, you know, might be like a shitty human being. And here they are talking about attachment styles and talking about healing from trauma and these things. And it's like there's kind of like it's kind of like an aversion to that. And we want teachers who have really gone through what we are wanting to experience more deeply. Um, and we want teachers who are intrinsically motivated to deepen their own understanding of the things that they are teaching about. People who are like compelled by the beauty of the subject that they are teaching. Um, and so, what I wonder is like in the model of the cave, where the prisoner is forced out and experiencing the light, that are they the best equipped person to instill in the rest of the prisoners um like a spark in their soul? Because I think so much of what a good teacher does is focuses less on the peak enlightenment of once you're out of the cave, the experience of the bliss, the ecstasy, the light, the yada yada yada, and much more a an ability to tolerate the process and the journey from the prison to the light. And so if this prisoner, I mean, it's kind of glossed over, right? Like the experience of the walking from the prison to the light. But you can kind of imagine, like, you know, he's getting dragged and like he's probably kicking and screaming and like, not wanting to leave. Um, is there something lost there in the fact that they didn't experience the pains and the trials of like having this ideal that you are compelled by seeing the summit of the mountain, but like slipping and falling and realizing you don't have the right gear and like the real learning in that and the resilience and the faith, right, that and the resolve that instills. um that's something that I really wonder about. um so Yeah, this is actually kind of helping because we have this discussion at 3, and we have a chance to submit some questions that will be, answered in the discussion. And I had put one about, uh, yeah, like the the duty that the prisoner is tasked with in going back into the cave and teaching people. Like, how do you do that? Like, how do you actually teach people? Because Socrates mentions, like, at the very end of the cave, he mentions that like he doesn't believe that the soul is something that um is like illuminated through this external surgical implantation of knowledge by a third party. He believes it has an innate vision, but it just needs to learn how to use it properly. And so the job of a teacher is much more about revealing one's innate vision rather than kind of looking at it as like a blank slate and like something that I can now paint. It's like a canvas that I can paint on. Um, just kind of this very detached like way of looking at things. So it's like, how do you do that? Like, how do you train the intrinsic motivation of people? I remember like Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching has a story about how, or wait, is it Rumi? I can't remember. About how like the most effective leaders will at the end make people feel like they did all the work themselves. Um, so it's like, how do you do that? But then also like, there's obviously still an active, it's like something that the teacher is doing, right? Um, so there's kind of that question of like, how does the forced prisoner go about illuminating the consciousness of the prisoners and actually convincing them, persuading them to leave? but, like, on their own accord. And then the other question is, like, are is the prisoner actually the best equipped person of doing that, given that they were forced out and not, um, shown the light themselves? I think in the context of the story, I don't think anyone who has been only living in the light would be able to adequately understand the like, tragedy of the prisoner's dilemma, right? Like, only the prisoner can really understand how tragic it is to stay in the cave because they've lived in both worlds, and they understand the utter, like, distortion and, limited nature of what life in the cave is like. And a person who's only been in the light, um, I think isn't not going to understand that, and also probably lose patience much more quickly in the face of reluctance to leave the cave. But again, it's like the prisoner also didn't have to endure their own resistance because they just got forced out. They didn't have a choice. So, yeah, those are all kind of curiosities, but I think I'm going to end this blabbering for now. And yeah, thank you to a couple people who joined and one person who liked. I hope this was helpful, and we'll see if I continue to do these.